when it came my time for interrogation, there was this German guard, Schrenk. Yeah, we know all about you. And to my amazement, he went back to a file. Yeah, we know all about you. Your mother and father, and he named their names. You live on a dairy farm. You've got a brother and a sister, and he named their names. We know all about you. And then he says, I'm sure that you'd like to have them know that you're safe and well. Of course, I said, certainly, sir. Well, then you fill out this Red Cross sheet, and it gave name, rank. Then all the rest of them were all military. What kind of plane you were flying, what altitude you're at, what kind of bombs you were carrying, what your intended target were. You handed it back to him, all blank. Oh, he just flew into a rage. You dummkopf, don't you think we know that you flew in a B-17? Write it down. And of course, I gave my name, rank, and serial number. He took out his pistol and whacked me across the head where I saw stars. Then every time he would ask a question, I would give my name, rank, and serial number. He kept on beating me up. At last, he pointed the gun right at my temple, and he said, you better answer the next question or else. I composed myself, give my name, rank, and serial number again.
You are about to embark upon the great crusade
to meet this mounting aggression.
And make no mistake about it, good will prevail.
What are your memories of learning about the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor?
I can remember it well. I was having breakfast with my family, and my mother was just shocked when she found out. And of course, she was very fearful that both of us would be drawn into the war.
Did you join right away, or did you wait a little bit?
I joined on my 19th birthday.
And where did you go after that to train?
You mean Kearns, Utah, for basic training. Shepherd Field, Texas, for mechanical training. Tyndall Field, Florida, for the gunnery training. Alexandria Army Air Base for flight training.
So you were assigned to be a ball turret gunner, correct?
Yes.
And how did that happen?
I was the last one chosen on the crew. Everybody else was afraid of it. I tried to give it away. Nobody would take it. So I was stuck with it.
It's a pretty tight space, right?
It's a ball that's exactly 3 feet across. It's usually manned by somebody quite small, usually 5'6", 5'7". I was 5'11" and a half.
Wow. So how did you squeeze in there?
Well, I couldn't wear my heavy flying suit, so I had to get rid of that. Then I was very, very scrunched in there, believe me.
And these are long flights, 10 hours sometimes, right?
10, 12, well, yes. A lot of times 12, even 14 sometimes.
And what kind of gun did you have in the turret?
250 caliber machine guns.
And did you have the ability to pivot and swing them around?
Oh, yes, 360 degrees and almost a little bit above 180 degrees.
How did you move yourself around? Did you have gears, or did you just use your own momentum?
All you had to do is, you had two handles. All you had to do is tilt the handle which way you wanted to go, either up or down or turning.
Now, one of the things that we talk about a lot with bomber crews is how cold it was on the planes.
Oh, yes, it got very, very cold, sometimes minus 60.
How did you deal with that?
As best as I could. Luckily, I came from a farm, and I was very used to the cold weather. So I don't think it bothered me as much as the southern guys that perhaps didn't even see a snowflake. So I think I was much better prepared than them.
Was it tougher to not have your heavy flying suit?
Very much so, because the electric flight suit that you had was very unreliable. A couple times it burned out completely, and I was left with absolutely no heat at all.
Oh my goodness. Tell me about your first mission. Obviously, this is your first real bombing run. What do you remember about it, and what comes to mind?
First bombing run wasn't too bad. It was to Ludwigshafen. I can't remember what we were bombing at the place, but the first bombing raid wasn't too bad. It was the second one that, my worst one.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because there was a lack of communication that led to some trouble there, right?
Yes, lack of communication, but more so weather problem, because we had taken off from the air base, and after we were well on our way, the weather turned bad, and they called all the crews back, but for some reason our unit didn't get the call back, so we went on to bomb the target alone. So we faced the whole doggone Luftwaffe. They bore down on us and shot the heck out of us. First thing that happened, we got a hit in our number 2 engine. It took the whole rear half of the engine out. There was a gaping hole it must have been at least 4 feet across. And then the next thing, we received another burst back in the tail section, and that also had a great big hole right through the airplane. We did make it back to England, although we didn't make it back to our base. We crash landed in a field that was under construction. It was so dark and so foggy that we didn't realize it was under construction, and we almost collided with the pile of stumps in the middle of the runway.
Well, let's move on to another mission now, the one we're going to spend the most time on, and that's February 22nd, 1944, and it's, I believe, over Denmark, correct?
That's correct. Our small group was used to fly a decoy run, trying to lure the Luftwaffe away from the main targets in the Ruhr. Well, we'd been attacked by quite a number of fighters on the way in, but it was almost a routine mission. Just before we were shot down, I saw a Ju-88 hit the airplane just to our left, and I saw him crash into the ocean. And just about 3 or 4 minutes later, it was our turn. And the first thing I heard was a great big explosion. The next thing I heard was the pilot calling the navigator, asking for the nearest land. And I knew right then that we have had it. We were going down. And the navigator came back immediately. He says, 20 minutes to landfall due east. So in other words, we had 20 minutes with our plane being on fire. There was explosion every few, I would say every 10 seconds or so, there'd be another explosion. You wouldn't believe how many. They were so severe that they would blow the fire completely out, but then it would reignite and you'd have another explosion. And the wing held off all the way until we were just over landfall. And then there was one final blast and it blew the whole end of the wing off. What saved me is during that 20 minutes, I had plenty of time to get out of the turret and be ready to bail out in case we were over land. We all got out successfully except for the pilot. Had the misfortune of landing in a frozen over lake, but the ice wasn't that thick and he broke through the ice and he was calling out for help. There were some Danish people that wanted to save him, but the Germans shot at him and wouldn't let them save the pilot. Then after he was dead, then they made the Danes go out and get his body.
All right, so what happened to you? Describe the jump, first of all.
The jump was pretty much routine. one of the waist gunners was going to exit first, and when he saw what outside, for some reason he froze. I gave him a big kick in the rear and sent him out. Then I jumped out, but when I pulled the ripcord, the chute didn't deploy. But it wasn't that big a deal. I reached back in the covers and pulled the drogue chute out, and the parachute opened up successfully. I hit like a ton of brick because they had deliberately made the parachutes real small because the Germans had a habit of shooting men in their parachute, and making the chute small limited the time that you were in the air. I landed in a muddy field, and there was already a semicircle of Germans around me, all pointing their gun at me. So I didn't have the least chance to escape or anything but to be captured. They took us to a schoolhouse that had been taken over from the Danes, and that's where they kept us for the night.
Did they interrogate you?
They interrogated us, but not that much. The real interrogation came later.
When did the more intense interrogation happen?
After we got the Stalag Luft. This is the third day now, and we hadn't had anything to eat and very little to drink. We were hungry as the dickens. They took us into this great big room where there must have been at least 500 prisoners waiting to be interrogated. During the time you were waiting, you heard every kind of horrible sound, like beatings, screaming, cursing, begging for mercy, and occasional gunshot. When it came my time for interrogation, there was this German guard. If Hollywood had picked him for a character, they couldn't have done a better job. The first thing you noticed, he was missing his right arm at the elbow. The other thing you noticed, he had a scar right across his face where even his left eye was missing. And he had what we call a burp gun, which is kind of the equivalent of our AK-47. And he would punch you the way he wanted you to go. When I entered the room, the German officer treated like he was an old friend of mine. And of course, I gave him my name, rank, and serial number. He wanted to know if I wanted to have a chair and a cigarette. And I said, no, thank you, sir. I don't want either. I prefer to remain standing. And then he says, oh, yeah, Schrenk. Yeah, we know all about you. And to my amazement, he went back to a file, went through the file, and he came back with the folder. Yeah, we know all about you. Your mother and father, and he named their names. You live on a dairy farm. You've got a brother and a sister, and he named their names. We know all about you. And then he says, I'm sure that you'd like to have them know that you're safe and well. And of course, I said, certainly, sir. Well, then you fill out this Red Cross sheet, and it gave name, rank, parents' names so that they could be notified. And then all the rest of them were all military. What kind of plane you were flying, what altitude you're at, what kind of bombs you were carrying, what your intended target were, what other targets you had briefed on. So you handed it back to him all blank. Oh, he just flew into a rage. He says, you don't you think we know that you flew in a B-17? Write it down. And of course, I gave my name, rank, and serial number. He took out his pistol and whacked me across the head where I saw stars. And then every time he would ask a question, I would give my name, rank, and serial number. He kept on beating me up. The German guard behind me would take the gun barrel and ram into my back. And this went on for I don't know how long. Then at last he pointed the gun right at my temple, and he said, "You better answer the next question or else." And of course, then you think there's gunshots. And I composed myself, give my name, rank, and serial number again, and he kicked me in the rear that I almost flew out of the door, and I breathed a sigh of relief. And I found out later, if you would have given even the least little bit of information, they would have beaten you to a pulp trying to get more.
After you survived this brutal interrogation, what happened then?
They finally gave us a little something to eat. It was a crust of bread smeared with a type of jelly made out of beets. But when you're hungry that long, if anything tastes good.
How long did they keep you there?
Only about a day or so. And then they put us on a train taking us to Stalag Luft IV. But they had also taken away our shoes and stockings, so we had to walk to the train station in the snow barefooted. Stalag VI was bad. You didn't occasionally get a Red Cross parcel, not steady or anything like that. You suffered more from the cold because the barracks weren't heated or anything. It was just all the people crowded in the same room. You got some body heat from other GIs. You got one meal a day if you got that. Sometimes if there was any little thing that irritated the Germans, like huge Allied victory or something like that, they would punish you. Or somebody did something stupid, like one time somebody desecrated the picture of Hitler, and we paid dearly for that.
Now the Soviets were approaching from the east at that point, right?
That is correct.
Okay, and so what did the Germans do as the Russians got closer?
Well, we could, the first place you had to put shutters on at 3 o'clock every afternoon and keep them on until I think it was 9 o'clock the next morning. And as the Russians were approaching, you could actually, even with the shutters on, you could see the flashes of light. And then a week or so later, you could actually hear the rumble of artillery. And that's when the Germans decided to evacuate the camp. Now, this is in July, so it's very, very warm. And they marched us to some boxcars and started loading us around noon. And as the boxcar got full, they would take bayonets and jab the guys in the doorway. So they'd go back in and make room for more prisoners. And at last, there was standing room only. Then they slammed the door shut. And we were in that boxcar the rest of the day, no food, no water. And of course, the temperature just soared. As it got dark, they moved the train to Memel, Poland, Lithuania, rather, and loaded us onto a coal ship. And there, too, the hold of that coal ship was so crowded that you couldn't even sit down or anything. You stood standing for 3.5 days. No food, no water. And to make it even worse, there was about 2 or 3 inches of coal dust on the floor. So every time your feet could never really get a firm footing. And by the time you got down there, your legs were just aching. You were so crowded. They had no sanitation whatsoever. Everybody had severe dysentery from the poor diet, and you relieved yourself right where you stood. So the air was just as foul as it could be. It was hot as the dickens from all the body heat. The only ventilation was about a 4-foot opening where we had come down into the hold.
I can't even imagine. What happened after that?
When they got to the destination, they put us on a boxcar, and in this boxcar they had the Hitler Jugend. In other words, the real young, these were Marine, and I could speak German. I asked them how old they were. They were 12 and 13 years old, guarding us. And I think they were more afraid of us than what we were afraid of them. But the train ride only lasted overnight, and we ended up at a place called Grostichow, Poland. When we got on this boxcar, they made us put on our overcoats, and they shackled us in twos. So now we can't. It's the middle of the summer, hot as the dickens, and we're in an overcoat, shackled together. But anyway, we got this German officer saying, "Today is your lucky day. Not only are you going to get one Red Cross parcel, you're going to get 2 Red Cross parcels." And my gosh, I couldn't believe my ears. But sure enough, they handed out 2 Red Cross parcels. In other words, you got one under each arm. The minute that was done, I heard them give their order, "Affix bayonets." Then they released a bunch of police dogs, and they run us down the road for 5 kilometers, jabbing us with bayonets, and the police dogs snapping at our heels. And the only reason that they had given us the Red Cross parcels, they knew that you would drop them, and that way they could say that you didn't want the parcels, you threw them away. When we finally reached the destination, they had us lay in this meadow. You could about imagine how famished we are. No water or anything for better than 4 days. It's about 4.5 days now in the sweltering heat. And the Germans would taunt us. There was some pumps nearby. They would pump water and throw the water at us and do everything to antagonize us. And all of a sudden, one of the GIs started singing "God Bless America," and we all joined in. And that just absolutely infuriated the Germans, knowing that we were, so desperate for water, and yet we could have the nerve to taunt them right back. They finally gave the order, either you stop or we start shooting. And of course, then we had no choice. Then they had what we called the strip search. They took one prisoner at a time and made him completely undress and searched everything that they owned. When my turn came, I was about one of the only GIs that managed to hang on to both of my parcels. A few of them managed to hang on to one. And there's this great big German guard, we had called him Ham Hands. He was one of our guards in Stalag Luft IV, and he was the most brutal guard you can imagine. One thing he would do is, when you weren't watching, he would take the rifle butt and snap it on your arch, trying to break your arch. Other times, he would come up and cuff your ear, trying to break your eardrum. He would do everything like that. And that's the guy that was going to strip search me. I hadn't taken any of my clothes off, and he grabbed the Red Cross parcel, and I could speak German. I told him, those are Red Cross parcels, they're mine. He took his pistol and wham on my head. I fell on the ground, really composed myself, kept on that they were mine. 5 different times he hit me either on the chin or on my head. My head was just a bloody mess. And I finally realized that if I would keep on refusing, that he would actually kill me. So at last, I let him have the parcels. And the minute his back was turned, I grabbed my belongings and ran out and hid amongst the guys that had already been searched, and hid my head under my overcoat, pretending I was asleep. He came out looking for me, cursing in German, made several passes in front of me, not knowing I was there, and he finally went in, and I breathed a sigh of relief. I'm sure if he would have found me, that would have been the end of me.
Now, as time went on, and they forced you west, right? As the Russians came?
Yes, they were forcing us west, but they evacuated the camp because the Russians were coming, and there were no more prison camps that they could put us into because there'd been so many of them that had been taken over that I was on the what's called the German Death March for 86 days. You never saw was inside of a heated building. You either slept in some farmer's barn or many, many times just out in the open in a field. You had one blanket that you shared with 5 other people. I mean, they each had a blanket, so you'd form a group of 5 people sharing each other's blanket.
How were you liberated?
By the English army. They treated us very, very well. It had been way over a year since I had a bath. And of course, all during that death march, you couldn't shave, so I had a great big mob of unruly whiskers, which I just hated. And we were just filthy with lice, fleas, and bed bugs.
What are you most proud of from your service?
Well, I think that I feel in a very, very, very small way I helped preserve our freedom. And so many people really don't know what freedom is like until they actually lose it. Like I lost it. I realized what it's like to not be free, but the average, especially here in America, I don't think most of them even give it a thought. They just think everybody is free, and that is not the case.